Death is a guarantee in life, but when exactly we die is not so certain. Hyper Light Drifter proudly wears his 2D video game and anime influences on his sleeve, as the game plays out like a rated R Zelda game in a Miyazaki film while incorporating modern gameplay with a respect for 8 to 16-bit retro gaming. While the world of Hyper Light Drifter may feel like it gets smaller the more times you go through this game, it's not as if it's any different from the world of A Link to the Past, which Hyper Light Drifter is inspired by, and each area has unique enemies and bosses which are appropriate for their respective setting. There will be spoilers from here on out, most of which is confirmed by the writers, while some is speculation and theory from the fan community and elsewhere, given the game's minimalist story and lack of written dialogue apart from the game's language, which you can try to decipher. I've played this game on the PC, Mac, and Nintendo Switch numerous times, but I recommend playing this game with any system involving a controller, so for my gameplay footage, I played this with the Nintendo Switch. So unless you're playing the alternate drifter wearing the wolf mask, who I will refer to as the wolf drifter and whom we'll get to later on, we're greeted with an opening cutscene explaining the backstory and outlining the stakes in this game's universe, with the game taking place in the continent called the Land of Light, just one part of the broader World of Light. After the Land of Light was consumed by either a war or by a group of species activating the diamond structure called the Immortal Cell, we are introduced to the blue-skinned feline like protagonist called the Drifter, or the Magician like the tarot card, standing in blood-soaked waters and surrounded by the bodies of various species including lizards. The Drifter starts to cough blood and kneel down, signaling the beginning of the Drifter's disease, and after the dead bodies have disappeared, we see the emergence of the game's main villain, Judgment, rise from underneath him and behind, unable to be killed by the Drifter's slash as the entity is in control of the Immortal Cell. Then the Drifter wakes up from a dream in the broken shadows, having arrived in the Land of Light by boat. Following our introduction to combat and learning the basics of the game, we see the town from on top, and it looks like heaven. Even after this world's been dealt a giant blow, the World of Light looks like it's doing okay. But as we try to approach the Monolith Gallery when we decode the messages and learn the history of each of the game's areas, we're haunted by a vision of Judgment and pass out. We next find the Drifter sleeping in the house of another Drifter, which we'll come back to, but for now, you wake up and you explore the central town, where you first come across your first teleportation checkpoint, which will come in handy throughout the game, as well as the center of the town, or heart, if you want to call it that. If you're impatient and dig yourself a speed run, you'll want to skip over to your first area to clear, but if you stick around town, you can interact with the citizens and learn some of the town's history through images as opposed to written dialogue, like the merchant, who was saved by the Guardian. There are 4 drifters that you'll come across throughout the game. One who has left you in his home, one who may or may not be a projection when the monoliths are activated, the Minotaur, who you'll encounter at the Horde arena underground in town, and the town drifter, the drunk, sitting to the right of town alone with a bottle in hand, and who is part of the same blue species you are. We don't know how effective of a drifter he was, but we know that for whatever reason, the drunk was cast away by the citizens of town, and now he doesn't bother to head out of town like the other drifters in this world and drinks away, possibly aware of the implications of trying to seek out the Immortal Cell, which we'll come back to. There's speculation that the drunk may have been the victim of blue species bigotry, which might explain why our drifter covers his face except for his eyes, or the fact that he's another drifter, but I'm skeptical, especially for the latter theory about distrust of drifters. But getting back to navigating the Land of Light, there are 3 areas, the west, north, and east, which are open for you to start your journey, and at the bottom of your map is the south, which is blocked off until you have completed all 3 of the first areas, or at the very least activate enough modules to get to and defeat each area's boss before lifting the 3 pillars. If you are unlocking all the outfits and abilities, you will have to revisit each area, as some doors require a certain amount of keys to unlock some areas, and while you can go through each area in any order, I like playing one way of Hyper Light Drifter that feels like a compromise of each mode of gameplay when you're choosing your setting. In my case, I have a preference for the Wolf Drifter, but for this gameplay's footage, I played a standard route with the regular Drifter, which I'll go over here, as well as display what the Monoliths translate to and how they relate to the overall story.
Transcendence, faith, immortality, rifts crafted, dangerous potential, a foundation for faith and violence, a loss of self, a narrow path traveled.
The North, the home of the bird folk, is a pretty great introduction for beginners learning how to navigate this game, and is where the Drifter first walks the defined path into the wintry mountains, and the soundtrack by Disasterpeace is pretty appropriate for the snowy environment, suggesting a nomadic hero's journey. I mean, the stairs you use to enter the region are quite heavenly as well, even before you start to see snow, and being, at least in appearance, heavenly and divine. The mountainy region's main theme is religion. Religion can be a beautiful thing for believers, even from the point of view of an atheist, as long as you're utilizing kindness and humility. But as we move through the dregs in between central town and the north, we can see the wreckage of a past conflict still haunts this region of the Land of Light, and a more recent conflict affects the bird folk rooted in the folk's religion, with the enemy vultures embracing fundamentalism. When we're trying to reach to the top and get past the North's vultures, we can spot a Titan, one of the large monstrous robotic beings that we see decaying during the opening cutscene, covered in snow, frozen in time, and while activating your first module in order to unlock certain areas around the North, you find the bodies of vultures, as well as at least one possible drifter who didn't get as far as you did. So there are various enemies you'll come across. Some are all around the Land of Light, others are region only. From the very beginning of the game, the Dirks, along with their riflemen who both appear in all four of the main areas in the game, are an easy opponent to deal with, and as you keep playing, one of the most satisfying things to do is playing combat, especially when you unlock your abilities including the chain dash and the bullet deflect. The more advanced Dirks do become a bit of a pain as you advance though. The Dirk Gunman is a bulking Hulk-like monster that'll blast you away if you're not too careful later on in the south, and the Dirk Rocketman is the worst of them if you don't slice away their rockets, which can stalk you if you don't take cover. As for the North's unique enemies, the flying vultures only need one shot or slash to go down, preferably shooting them if you have enough ammo, especially when you're going through the North's last challenge to collect the area's last monolith. The vulture acolytes are easy if you keep up with their skips and give them a shot and slash combo, but the shaman can be tricky, dealing projectile attacks from a distance, forcing you to shoot or deflecting them with your sword if you unlock the deflect ability, and if you're too close to it while slashing, it'll attack you underneath with purple squares that take away 2 of your health points. Going back to the story, how exactly did the fanatical vultures take over? Well, there are 2 vultures still living in the Land of Light who practice the more peaceful religion. One in central town, and the vulture hermit, who is tending to birds and eggs in the hatchery, and tells the story of the vultures' takeover to the Drifter, seeing them burning places of worship and making sacrifices, all while the hermit tried desperately to save as many innocent birds before hatching as possible. He doesn't explain how the new religion came about, but like I was saying at the beginning of this chapter, it was likely the result of zealots seizing the opportunity post-war and rallying up followers who were hopeless after the conflict, seeing so many of their fellow birdfolk die and needing something to believe in, extreme or not, and they were following the orders of the patriarchal leader, the Hierophant, who looks less like a priest or monk and more like a king. Again, like the Drifter, the Hierophant is another character inspired by a tarot card, also depicted as a priest, and depending on how you see him, he can either preach good or bad. In front of the Hierophant and below his feet on his card are the keys to heaven, and in front of Hyperlight Drifter's Hierophant, when we walk in, we see him giving his version of divine intervention by sacrificing one of the vultures to heaven, or so we think. The Hierophant can be a little tough for beginners as a boss, but gets easier to predict which attacks he goes with. You just gotta know the patterns of his vortex square attacks underneath you and deal with the 4 nuisance flying vulture attacks he sends at the center of the battle area. When we finally defeat him, we see that there's not 1 vulture but 2 holding the Hierophant together, exposing the fraud and hypocrisy of someone who said they preach for something better even if it went extreme. In other words, the Hierophant is a liar masquerading as a savior, and as you see him when you defeat him, his followers flee, probably not out of fear, but realizing that their leader is a fraud. Of course, there's the plot hole of why there are still vultures respawning and trying to kill you, even after their religious leader has died. Perhaps they don't need a leader anymore, but regardless. Getting back to walking through this game, regardless of which region you choose to begin your journey, your first region is where you come across and meet another drifter, and according to the writer's roommate, the Guardian, wearing a pink outfit which stands out while he's surrounded by dead enemies. Like our drifter, the Guardian is another drifter seeking the immortal cell as well, having visions of the cell as well as having met Judgment. If you're activating the monoliths around the Land of Light, you get to see the Librarian flash for a few seconds before disappearing and giving you the text of each monolith, each area having 4 monoliths with all 16 giving you information about the immortal cell, but we'll come back to that. So Librarian was another drifter in this, albeit one who was more interested in learning about the world of light instead of fighting in combat, and it's possible she was connected to the library before the vultures conquered with their fanatic religion. It's possible that the Librarian stumbled to the same disease the drifter has, which is why she left projections of herself within the monoliths. But given that the library is also home to a monolithic message, there's a chance that she may have been killed by the vulture zealots as they took over, probably because she collected and valued one thing which conflicted with their fanatical religion: knowledge. If that's the case, she died like the bird folk before the vultures took over, practicing peace instead of violence.
An isolated people, fearful and obsessed, offering of a great cleansing flame, a poison matted in homeland, fragile, balanced, scorched, undone.
Next, we move on to the east, which is probably my favorite area in the game, not simply because it's the easiest area to clear and find all modules, at least for me, but because of how it contrasts with how grim the wintry north is. Here, it's beachy, despite its nicknames being the lake or Eastern Watershelf. Just walking through the entrance and hearing the sound of the water and environment makes it feel like you're walking through a creek, and the sound design's pretty incredible, and this is where the game's soundtrack by Disasterpeace really shines, with an ambient, calm environment before walking towards one of the destroyed titans, while the percussion and synth pounce to the ears. The toads in the east are in contrast to the vultures in the north, whereas the vultures who followed the Hierophant weaponized religion to intimidate and burn villages because they thought they were doing good after the war which took down the Titans. The toads have no morals and have no shame about it, happily flaying or skinning the otters trying to flee and putting their heads on spikes for the hell of it. They do, however, have need to use the great cleansing pink flame they carry around, and which is around this area and for which burns you if you're too close, though it's not clear whether or not they worship it in a religious sense, which I am going to assume no. Regardless, they're proud of their mutilations. They're nihilistic in the sense that they don't need someone above telling them that their practice of flaying is wrong, and they'll hoard their flame in isolation despite whatever use it might have elsewhere, which you'll see in full when you approach the boss of the East. The Toad King, or Emperor, a massive, obese beast of a toad who greets you to your battle by chewing on an otter while wearing the skins of his dead comrades and bearing algae on his face. He might also be called the Hermit, since it might explain his solitary, isolated nature, as well as being the name of the song which plays during the boss fight, which might be another reference to tarot cards. It's a hell of a welcome party, but unfortunately the Emperor is the easiest boss in the game. You just have to get behind him at the right spot and stay there to avoid his flame glass tossing and slice and shoot away before his guts spill over. And at least you won't have to use a health pack or two when you're playing a boss rush. As for the Eastern region's sub-enemies, the two types of toads are easy kills. The ninjas who may emerge from the water, you can just deflect their shuriken before slashing them, and the bomber toads more or less the same, but the plants can vary. While the smaller 1/kill plants are a breeze as long as you dash away before they explode, the bigger plant beast is an annoyance and will pulverize you if you don't shoot from a distance, and once it's done with its charge, give it a few strikes with your sword. Other than what I have just described, there's not really a whole lot of story to this area, so let's move on to the third region before unlocking the south. Precious moments captured by crystal, a stillness of mind, skill honed sharp, midnight looming, trapped by desperation to remain. The western region, aka the Midnight Woods or Crystal Forest, may be the hardest region of the starting 3 to clear, and as one of the names for this area suggests, the west is literally a mystical forest, with aqua-greenish crystals surrounding you, including ones that cover dead raccoon soldiers, supposedly fighting one of the titans with a crystal attack which backfired. But as the monolithic text implies, the raccoons who had fought a previous war have reawakened, acting like this is a war zone and fighting against the Drifter for whatever reason. The theme of this area is war and the consequences of conflict. We have already seen how the outcome of the broader conflict affecting the north and east in different ways, and it's implied that the folk of each region fought back, but here the answer to what happened to the Titans is more direct. Like I said, we can see that raccoon folk living in the forest fought back and paid a price, as the raccoon hermit tells you how they blasted a crystal gun on a Titan, destroying it but also crystallizing themselves, freezing them in time until a certain point. Seeing as how there were 2 raccoons using the crystal gun, it's likely he found out too late that the reawakened raccoons started acting paranoid, as being frozen for an indeterminate amount of time would have driven them insane. Looking back on this level, I keep thinking about this Chris Hedges quote from his book War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning, which reads, quote, "The rush of battle is a potent and often lethal addiction, for war is a drug, one I ingested for many years." The war before the events in the game was destructive to the raccoons and the other folks like the birds, vultures, toads, and otters, but it was the only thing the raccoons had going, and they welcome you not with open arms, but with combat. Around the forest, you'll find that while slashing the crystals can load your ammo, if you hang around a crystal for too long, you'll get stuck in it, and will have to slash your way out of them, and you better be careful walking on the crystal spike traps. Not only are they some of the most annoying aspects of this game, at least in how you navigate around the area, but they can cost you 2 health points and make dashing difficult if you're trying to get keys or outfits, like the dash challenge at the end of the level. As far as enemies go, the 2 raccoon enemies or crystal knights can be challenging if you're cornered. The gunman raccoon or pistol tier is easy to slash away and deflect bullets, and the swordsman can avoid bombs, bullets, and slash attacks before attacking. The unique crystal enemies are mixed here, though. While the crystal spiders are a pain if you don't slash them in time, the big bulky crystal monsters are a disappointment, sending a crystal attack from under your feet, but giving you enough time to slash and shoot combo. In other words, not as much of a concern as the plant beast, leaper, or the dirt gunman, so they're an easy kill. Moving on from there is the forest boss, the Hangman, another boss inspired by the Tarot card, and as the Tarot card implies with him being suspended in time while hanging on the tree, although he could have been frozen during the initial war, there's speculation he willingly froze himself in time, either out of guilt for surviving or in solidarity with the raccoons, probably waiting for the moment he would have to fight again. If that's the case, then the quote from before applies aptly to how this character sees himself. While fighting the Hangman, you'll see his weapon besides the gun is whip-like as he skips around, and if you're not too careful to use your dash, he can kill you with one dance around the boss area. He can also send crystal spike attacks from underneath, as well as shoot shards towards your direction. Out of all of the 3 starting bosses, he's the second hardest boss before we get to the archer in the south. But again, it's just a matter of strategy and using your chain dash, though don't get too close to those frozen raccoons, as they become another obstacle to completing the boss fight. Once you've raised the pillar in your 3rd area and teleport back to central town, you'll see that the south has unlocked if you try to enter again, so let's finish the walkthrough. Overwhelming wonders and power, desperate hunger, violence, distortion of life, devouring body, first victim of the invasion. Down south, or the Barren Hills or the Waste, the theme here is transcendence, that is, how technological advances in the Land of Light were made here, but came at a giant cost, with the region's desert environment looking more like Tatooine in A New Hope, with the floating NPC robots lurking around, looking like dusty droids, which reminds me, going back to the game's influences, if Hyperlight Drifter is a Miyazaki film, it's pretty close to Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. at least in terms of the game's post-war environment, except whereas the film is pretty direct with its anti-war and environmental themes, Hyper Light Drifter is much more personal, even with its regional themes, but we'll get to why in a moment. Here in the South, we learn that the lizard people, no, not that kind, tried to utilize the technology left underground and make use of the robots in the laboratories now abandoned except for the Dirks who lurk within, and as a result of going too far with their technological advances, including creating different versions of the Dirks, the robots turned against them, including the 4 bosses, the Summoner, the Sorcerer, the Reaper, and the main boss, the Archer. You also learn as you're exploring the area that this region is where the Dirks were created as well as the Titans, as we see when we beat each respective boss. The body parts used to make each one, like the huge eyes which look like they're watching the Drifter, as well as the giant beating heart after you beat the Archer. So this may have been explained elsewhere, but here in the South we have a possible origin for how Judgment was created. Some people speculate that Judgment is the opposite of the black jackal that follows us, in that Judgment is death and the jackal is life, so in other words, a metaphysical deity. But as we learn, the immortal cell was created by the species using technology. However it came about, Judgment emerged as an artificial intelligence who relies on the immortal cell to stay alive. That's probably the most likely explanation. If you played this game before, you may have noticed I haven't gone around to talking about the Black Jackal, who keeps appearing to the Drifter before meeting with the Guardian. The Jackal, aka Anubis, like the Egyptian god of death, was the owner of the power of the wellspring, or the power that helps the 4 races of each area activate the immortal cell, and has been at war with Judgment over control of that power, for if Judgment is allowed to hold on to the immortal cell, he'll activate the Titans once again. That's at least what the game's wiki says, but part of me is not satisfied, especially considering the game's vague nature. Hyper Light Drifter is a game grounded in realism, even if it has to use animal species as placement for human-like characters, like the Hylians in Zelda, even if there's something which appears supernatural in this game. In my opinion, there's a logical reason why something happens. See, for example, the fraudulent Hierophant in the north. And to explain, in a secular sense, the Anubis-like Jackal, it could either be a force outside of reality like Judgment, or it could be a fragment of the Drifter's imagination, his knowledge of the Jackal deity picked up by learning about ancient religions like the one in the north before the Zealots took over. More like a fragment of each Drifter's subconscious as they learn more about the Land of Light, maybe a side effect of the disease inflicted onto the Drifters in this world. So at the beginning of this area, after you've unlocked it, you come across the Guardian once more, unable to stand on his feet due to the disease taking its toll, and after he gives you a module location, he tells you his tragic backstory before setting off on his trek to find the immortal cell, finding his family dead due to having the same disease and first coming across the Jackal. And here, this is something which I've tried to find an explanation for but couldn't. What is this terminal disease? What exactly caused the disease? Did it spring up after the war? Was it spread by the piles of dead bodies we see during the opening cutscene? Was it inflicted upon by either the Jackal or Judgment as either a test to see if they wouldn't make use of the immortal cell and hand back the power to the Jackal? Or does the Drifter fail if, say, he were to take the cell for himself? Thus, the Jackal loses against Judgment. If the Guardian's family died before he set off on his path, why didn't he stumble to the disease and die along with his loved ones? Was it punishment for seeking out the immortal cell like our main Drifter protagonist, as well as some of the other dead Drifters we find near the modules in this world? And going back to the Jackal, if it's inspired by Anubis, the god of death, does he appear to the Drifter and Guardian as a guide, or as a grim reaper? Most, if not all, of these questions don't get answered, and while it might be frustrating for some gamers seeking answers from the game's creators, I don't mind, because ultimately what matters to me more with Hyper Light Drifter is the gameplay and combat. Anyway, since the South is home to the Dirks, most of the enemies here are of their kind, and you'll find plenty of bleepers and the massive gunmen around, especially with the last challenge behind the 8-module door. And moving on to the bosses, while the 3 sub-bosses are easy to beat, the Archer can be a challenge, especially if you've come across the Tower Archer at the Switch and iOS exclusive tower, which is considered non-canon to the main story. So at this point, once you've completed all 4 regions and the tower level, if you're playing Switch, you should have have all weapons and upgrades, as well as any additional health and grenades. To take a moment to look at your weaponry, there's really 3 guns I find useful for combat, and most of it is filler, with the exception of the railgun, which I have some beef with, but we'll get to why later. So you are only allowed to arm yourself with 2 weapons at a time, and in order to switch around your guns, you have to go into your menu. The pistol is a must for me in every scene of combat because of being able to do shoot and slash combos. And as for what your second gun should be, the blunderbuss shotgun won't do you wrong if you want to quickly deal with the crystal raccoons or deal a blow to the plant beasts before slashing them. But you might want to switch the bluss with the impact railgun you get after completing the South's 8 module door challenge, as that'll help you deal with Judgment more quickly. Speaking of Judgment, we can finally finish this walkthrough by talking about the underground Abyss. So after we've completed all of the areas and activated enough modules, we head back to Central Town where the elevator at the center of the Land of Light is activated, and we head down to the Abyss to face Judgment for the final fight. Yet, you'll notice, apart from the square at the center of town pulsating, that the town is just going on with its business. Nothing changes in terms of the town's dialogue when the Drifter is closer to finishing his task, and not a single resident seems concerned or panicked should the Drifter fail. Maybe they're just resigned to the possibility that the world of light is going to collapse on itself. As you use the elevator to enter the Abyss, you'll see that, entering underground, it doesn't look so much like a dark abyss. Rather, it's an underground metropolis, and an awfully quiet city, probably powered by the pink energy you see all around the Land of Light. And like the South, it was most likely another lab to make technological advances, as you'll see more abandoned desks as you're walking towards the immortal cell to fight Judgment. So what is the game's central theme? Mortality. And that is more than evident given the development of this game and its creative team and director, Alx Preston. It's no secret that Preston has been open about his lifelong congenital heart disease, and how art has been useful as a means to express his condition and experience, and Hyperlight Drifter is no different. Some of the clues to this are obvious throughout the game, like the Drifter holding his heart in the opening cutscene, his coughing, and the disease which won't go away as he progresses, and your controller vibrating and the sound of a heartbeat if your health is low. Others you might miss when you're playing, for example, when you raise any of the 4 pillars after defeating each area's respective boss, the pillar will pulsate like a heart. Hell, the company name which released the game is literally called Heart Machine, which is as on the nose as you get given Preston's open heart surgery. And sure, the Drifter beats more and more opponents, but his disease gets even worse the more he gets closer to the final boss, like the Guardian before him. We've also been killed multiple times throughout the game, barring a perfect run, and we've upgraded our weapons and gear to the best of their abilities, but then again, there's the inescapable certainty that our character is going to die. Why are we really beating Judgment? Is it to prevent another war? Or that a malevolent force like Judgment should not be allowed to consume the immortal cell? Who really should be allowed to have the gift of immortality? Sure, our lives and the lives of the birds, otters, raccoons, and lizards in the game aren't finite, but as long as technology exists and is left powered on, AI technology could potentially last forever. And as the immortal cell, which looks like a heart-shaped box, albeit for a different reason than what that song is about, when we revisit the library after we've activated all 16 monoliths, a text appears that we have to translate, which reads,
Harnessing a great wellspring, a perfect immortal cell was crafted to be imbued within all sentient life, a noble goal, though such power terrified others and brought ruin as its purpose was transmogrified. The abhorrent cell still festers deep in the chambers of this world.
So, who was terrified of the power of the cell? Most likely the Drifters, because while the possibility of achieving immortality would benefit them and everyone else, i.e. a noble goal, being seekers of knowledge such as the Librarian, they also knew that this power could be dangerous, as malevolent forces could take advantage of his power like Judgment. So the immortal cell was created with good intentions to extend the life of all the species, but however the ruin came about, from war with the Titans or just toying with unpredictable technology, the world was scarred, and countless people died. And as we see how the South became the first victim of the invasion, as they would have had the technology and know-it-all to create such a cell, and yet it backfired, leaving it mostly uninhabitable. See also the dregs, the ruined buildings in between bottomless red pits before heading off into each of the 4 areas. Going back to that Miyazaki film, that film's anti-war messaging might sink into how the inhabitants deal with post-war struggle, even if Hyperlight Drifter's story is more personal. Another point that I feel gets lost is that, unlike the previous 4 areas explored, the final boss doesn't have any enemies defending him, and sure, enemies do respawn if you choose to revisit all 4 areas, but all you really need to do is just walk right up to the Immortal Cell and Judgment will appear for battle, and no one is left to protect him in case he dies. This might be because the boss is a tougher battle, but it does raise a number of questions. Is Judgment actually evil? And like a question I brought up earlier, was this supposed to be a test to see if you didn't see the cell? In other words, do we really need immortality because eternal life would be worse than the lives we have now? Judgment seems to think so. And if you subscribe to the idea that he's responsible for the disease and suffering in the land of light, then the only way to truly stop him is to destroy the Immortal Cell. And as you see, after you have defeated Judgment, the cell bleeds out and the Drifter is still too wounded, his cough getting bloodier and unable to consume health packs anymore. So he walks down to where he came from, down to the crumbling ruins of the Abyss until his body stops and he sits underneath one of the statues of the Jackal, and the Jackal watching over you as the Abyss collapses on you. And as the Jackal leaves this world, we are greeted to an ending cutscene that mirrors some of the shots from the opening, where the Drifter was standing around the dead bodies who fought a war. Here he is standing over clear blue water, before he bleeds out, and before he's passed on, we see a view of the city cleared, the sun finally shining over the land of light. We can keep playing our game file to check which keys we may have missed or try to finish the 800 dash challenge in town. But if we really want to see what happened after the fight with Judgment, we see the skeleton of the dead Drifter sitting below the Jackal statue, confirming his death. The ending is different for the Wolf Drifter though. Most if not all of the cutscenes are well cut and her path is shorter, so we don't see her die the same way as the main Drifter. But given that she doesn't have the same coughing fits as him until the final battle, and because the Immortal Cell is still intact, it's possible she may have survived. But that could also mean Judgment could return in some form, or maybe another being will try to consume its power. Hyperlight Drifter is not a game where you're mandated to get all of the Gearbits, outfits, modules, monoliths, or keys unless you want to unlock everything in every area and earn some achievements. There's no percentage tally in your map telling you how much of the game you have completed like Breath of the Wild, but if you choose to find and unlock everything, you'll want to learn what each outfit and each piece of equipment is useful. You can buy all the swords and dash abilities, but you don't keep each outfit's abilities all at once, so you have to strategize which sword you use, what outfit, and which robot friend, so you have the best possible outfit before arena combat and the final Judgment showdown. The Ochre outfit is a must if you need one more health point, and the orange gear comes in handy for me since I like to dispose dirts easily with a roll of a grenade, so it helps to recharge my grenades faster. The green and blue gear helps fill my health quicker, and purple gear will help your dash, but more on that later. So putting aside the new Game Plus mode, where you only play with 2 HP and can't increase it with the Ochre gear or change your outfit, I have a preference for the Wolf Drifter. Sure, she only starts out with 3 health bars instead of the Drifter's 5, and most of the game's main story is cut, but from a combat point of view, her projectile beam attack works better for me than the Drifter's sword, so it's a compromise between standard mode and new Game Plus. Other than that, I feel like I could rant about how annoying it is that the only use I have for the railgun is to unlock certain areas, and isn't as useful as the increased railgun, which works like a cannon against Judgment, at least for me. But before we end things, I should probably talk about the giant elephant in the room that pulls people's hairs while playing. The Dash Challenge at the Dash Shop in Central Town. To be honest, I think this dash challenge is kind of fun after you've unlocked the chain dash and makes use of one of the best abilities to have in the game, at least if you have access to a keyboard and mouse and figuring out the appropriate hotkeys. Otherwise, if you're playing with a controller like I was, forget trying to do all of this in 5 minutes. Not that it's impossible, but the keyboard and mouse method doesn't let you slip as much when you're using a controller like I was with the Switch. You dash to 100 to unlock a Gearbit if you need it, but 800 to get the purple outfit? I mean, okay, the outfit's a must and it's a relief to complete it, but again, it's a pain trying to do it with the controller. Anyway. Hyperlight Drifter is loaded with ideas like religion, war, and the price of immortality. Even if the story is simple if you're playing a casual playthrough, when you break the game down even on an abstract level, there's multiple ways to interpret what's going on, and further, the game's main theme of mortality makes it exciting to deconstruct what it potentially says about the Drifter and the other ones in this world. Then again, sometimes simple gameplay is better and it's a hell of a good time to slash some enemies with an energy sword. Sure, the game gets really easy if you're playing the standard or wolf game, but if you've played Zelda games before, this shouldn't be a surprise. I suppose that's what happens when you find yourself fascinated by a great game so much. You can't stop playing and try to pick apart each aspect. I might look into Solar Ash in the future, and I'll definitely pick up Hyperlight Breaker from the same studio when it comes out. But for now, even with its minor limitations, Hyperlight Drifter is a respectable RPG with a fantastic soundtrack and excellent art direction that honors its influences, and asks us about heroism and how a hero will stand in the test of time. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video essay, please consider giving it a comment and like, and if you want to see more essays like this, please consider subscribing to help support this channel. Hopefully this year I will be able to contribute to interesting conversations about philosophy, politics, and video games, among other subjects.